pirates, swashbuckling outlaws of the high seas, infamous for their rebellious lifestyle and thirst for treasure. But was pirate life really as it's portrayed in movies and books, or was it perhaps a harsher reality fraught with danger and hardships? Today we're setting sail into the world of pirates, looking beyond the eye patches and parrots, and diving deep into the historical reality of pirate life, from their impressive ships, strict codes of conduct, and even the mystery surrounding their plundered riches. Let's embark on this maritime journey together. Let's delve deeper into the world of pirate ships. Contrary to popular belief, pirates didn't always sail the massive galleons we often see in films or storybooks. Those ships were incredibly large and slow, making them easy targets for naval forces and privateers. Instead, pirates often favored smaller, faster vessels like sloops and brigs. Sloops were particularly popular for their speed and maneuverability. These single-masted vessels were quick and could easily navigate the coastal waters where pirates often found their prey. They could also escape into shallow waters, where larger naval vessels couldn't follow. Brigs, on the other hand, were slightly larger, boasting 2 masts. They were a bit slower than sloops but could carry more crew and cargo, making them ideal for longer voyages or larger pirate crews. Whichever type they chose, pirates would modify their ships to suit their needs. This often meant removing unnecessary cabins or structures to make room for more crew members and cargo. They would also mount cannons for both offense and defense, turning these relatively modest vessels into formidable warships. It's also worth noting that most pirate ships were not built but rather taken. Pirates would often seize a suitable ship during their raids, then modify it to suit their needs. This not only saved them the effort and resources of building their own ship, but it also allowed them to continually upgrade their vessel as they came across better and more powerful ships during their voyages. Maritime life in the Golden Age of Piracy was far from the romanticized version we often see in popular culture. Discipline was harsh, and punishments for breaking the pirate code were brutal. These rules, often decided upon and agreed to by the crew, were necessary to maintain order on a ship full of ruthless men. The most well-known pirate punishment is probably walking the plank, but surprisingly, this is more myth than reality. While there are a few documented cases, it was not a common practice. Instead, pirates employed a variety of other punishments. Flogging was one of the more common methods of punishment. The wrongdoer would be tied up and whipped with a cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip made of 9 knotted ropes. This brutal punishment could leave a man weak, bloody, and in some cases even dead. Keel-hauling was another horrific punishment. A rope would be tied to the sailor, who would then be thrown overboard. The rope was then pulled, dragging the unfortunate soul under the ship across the barnacle-covered bottom. This could result in severe lacerations and quite often drowning. Marooning was perhaps the most feared punishment of all. The offender would be left on a deserted island or a remote sandbar with little more than a bottle of water and a loaded pistol. The pistol was not for self-defense, but rather to offer the marooned pirate a quicker death than starvation or exposure. However, it wasn't all brute force. Sometimes punishments were psychological. Pirates would sometimes employ sweating, where the crew would chase the offender around the ship or up and down the mast until they were exhausted. These punishments were harsh, but pirates lived in harsh conditions and harsh times. Discipline was necessary to prevent chaos, and these severe punishments served as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience. Let's dive deeper into the life of a pirate. Far from the romanticized, swashbuckling adventurers of fiction, the reality of pirate life was tough, dangerous, and often short-lived. The typical pirate was a working-class man in his late 20s. Most pirates started their seafaring careers as legitimate sailors, fishermen, or privateers, which were basically legal pirates with a government contract. Life at sea was their trade, and when they turned to piracy, it was often for economic reasons. Simply put, piracy paid better. Pirate ships were small communities unto themselves, with their own rules and hierarchies. Each crew member had a role, from the captain and the quartermaster to the boatswain, gunner, and cook. Every man was expected to do his job, and in return he received a share of any plunder. This was one of the more egalitarian aspects of pirate life. The loot was usually divided fairly, a stark contrast to the strict class divisions of mainstream society. The pirate's day would start at dawn, with the ship's bell signaling the beginning of the working day. The crew would work on maintaining the ship, navigating, and looking out for potential prizes. Meals were simple and usually consisted of hardtack, a type of long-lasting biscuit, salted meat or fish, and grog, a mixture of rum and water. Despite the harsh conditions, pirates did find time for entertainment. Music was an essential part of pirate life, with shanties sung to keep rhythm during work and instruments played for evening entertainment. Pirates also gambled, although this was often banned while at sea due to the potential for fights. Another popular misconception is that pirates were constantly engaged in battle. In reality, most pirate attacks were more like muggings than battles. Pirates preferred to target weaker, undefended merchant ships, and most of their victims surrendered without a fight. When they did fight, it was brutal and bloody, with pirates using a mix of firearms and cutlasses. Pirate life was a combination of long periods of boredom, punctuated by intense moments of terror and excitement. It was a hard life, with the ever-present threat of death by disease, violence, or execution if captured, but for those who chose it, piracy offered a taste of freedom and adventure that was hard to find in the rigid society of the time. Ah, pirate treasure. It's the stuff of legends, and probably what comes to mind when you think of pirates. Buried chests full of gold and jewels hidden on some deserted island waiting to be found. But how much of this is fact and how much is fiction? Firstly, let's talk about the loot. The primary goal of piracy was to obtain wealth, and pirates would target ships carrying valuable cargo. This could include gold and silver, but also items like spices, silk, tobacco, and even slaves. In fact, these goods were often more common than precious metals and gemstones, as they were the main commodities being transported across the seas during the Age of Exploration. Once a ship was captured, the pirates would take everything they could. This not only included the cargo, but also any personal valuables from the passengers and crew. In some cases, they would even take the clothes off their victims' backs. Everything had a value, and everything was divided among the crew according to their agreed shares. But what about burying the treasure? This is a staple of pirate lore popularized by stories like Treasure Island. However, in reality, it was quite rare. Pirates lived a precarious and often short life with no guarantee of a future. When they got their hands on wealth, they tended to spend it quickly, often on drink, gambling, and women in port towns. Why bury your treasure when you could be spending it? There are a few documented cases of pirates burying their loot, but it was the exception rather than the rule. The most famous is probably Captain William Kidd, who buried part of his treasure on Gardiner's Island, New York, in an attempt to use it as a bargaining chip when he was captured. As for the vast pirate hordes waiting to be discovered, they are likely just a myth. Most of the treasure that wasn't spent was probably lost at sea, scattered across the ocean floor with the many pirate ships that sank. So while the dream of finding a buried pirate chest is an exciting one, it's probably just that, a dream. Life at sea, especially in the Golden Age of Piracy, was an experience unlike any other. But was it all sea shanties and swashbuckling? Let's set sail into the realities of pirate life. Firstly, the ocean wasn't just a wide-open playground. It was, and still is, a treacherous place. Pirates had to contend with storms, disease, shipwrecks, and other dangers. Not to mention the constant threat of naval patrols and pirate hunters. The life expectancy for a pirate wasn't particularly high, and many met their end at the gallows or at the bottom of the sea. And then there was the daily routine. Contrary to the Hollywood image of pirates always engaged in battles or revelry, much of their time was spent on the monotonous tasks necessary to keep the ship sailing. This included cleaning, maintaining the ship, navigating, and keeping watch. Pirates also had to ration their supplies, especially during long voyages. Their diet mainly consisted of hardtack, a type of hard, dry biscuit, salted meat, and whatever fruits or vegetables they could keep from spoiling. Water was often scarce, and it wasn't uncommon for pirates to resort to drinking alcohol when their water supplies ran low. This led to a fair amount of drunkenness on board, which could cause its own set of problems. Living conditions were cramped, with the crew sleeping wherever they could find space. Hygiene was minimal at best, and disease was rampant. Scurvy, a disease caused by a deficiency of vitamin C, was a common affliction, as were other illnesses and infections. Medical treatment was rudimentary, and a serious injury or illness was often a death sentence. Despite these hardships, there was a certain sense of freedom that came with a pirate's life. They were outlaws, living outside the boundaries of society. They elected their own leaders, shared in their plunder and lived by their own code. For some, this was a preferable alternative to a life of servitude on a naval or merchant vessel. However, the reality of life at sea was harsh and not for the faint of heart. It was a life of constant risk, hardship, and danger, but for those who embraced it, it was a life of adventure, camaraderie, and the lure of untold riches. A pirate's life indeed. We've navigated through the tumultuous seas of pirate history, discovering that behind the romanticized depictions lie tales of hardship, survival, and a thirst for freedom. Pirates, in their own unconventional way, truly were masters of the sea, living life on their own terms outside societal norms. But their existence was far from the carefree, treasure-filled escapade often depicted. It was a life fraught with danger, disease, and the ever-looming shadow of a violent end. So the next time you think about hoisting the Jolly Roger, remember it's not all sea shanties and buried treasure. And as always, remember to keep questioning. And as always, thanks for watching.